Hi, this is Aidy here for CG Masters. Today let's talk about working in teams. It's basically the real power behind the human experience. In 3D, this means working on images, animations, or games together, telling stories basically, another essential human quality if I want to over-egg that pudding for a second. What we're talking about here is getting things from someone else's Blender or something out of yours and into any application really. So we're going to need these tools, and but it's actually a bit more than that, as we'll see. And if the words on their own haven't carried the importance of this subject, maybe I need to give this a little bit more gravitas. Behold! well, anyway, let's get into it. To give you a fast bird's eye view of everything, importing and exporting deal with working between other pieces of software. So if you needed to export out an FBX file to Unreal Engine 4, for example, or need to import in something from Maya or Max, the contents of these menus here are basically controlled by taking a look in our user preferences. If we have a look at the add-ons specifically, and then if we filter down to just show import and export, all the enabled ones here are the ones that are showing up in that list, and you can see there's a whole load of grayed out ones here as well. So we could really pack out that list if we wanted. So what of linking and appending? Well, if import and export is within other applications, then I'm sure you've guessed it, linking and appending we'll be using when working between different instances of Blender. There's nothing stopping us still using import and export, but I think you'll see we get greater power with link and append. And with great power comes great responsibility, or basically it gets a bit confusing. So appending is really straightforward to understand. We don't ever really need to append something out of Blender. It's kind of already set up as you work in Blender without even realizing it. So all we need to do is actually, if we want to bring something in, then this is where append comes in. So if we just click on append, all we need to do is just navigate to the blend file. So in this case, I've got this UH60 Blackhawk, which is downloaded from BlendSwap by Papa Dragon. Really good blend here. And if we just click on it, we can just then dig down into this folder structure, and then in this case we can choose either materials, objects, or any of these other directories that you could see. So if I just click on object and then maybe click on Helico 18 and then just click on append. Well, as soon as we do that, it just brings it into the scene, and then we can just treat this as we would any other object in our scene. So in my case, behold! Where things get even more powerful and slightly more crazy is with linking. So let's do as we did before and just go File, Link, and do that same object, helico.18, and then link that in, and you can see it's a blue wireframe. In fact, if we select it and we just take a look at the mesh data, you can see it's all grayed out. Any edits to this actual object would need to be done in the original file. We can't even scale, rotate, or move it or anything. If you've linked it in and we get in this nice blue outline and you actually realize you meant to append it in instead, what you can do is what's called making it local, which just removes the link from the other file and basically then appends it into this one. So what we can do is we can just press L to make local, and then we get this list. We can get these options. So we could just make the object itself local. If we did that, now we can actually just move it around, but the data is actually still linked to the other file. So any changes are actually going to get updated here, this is a method that I often do. However, we can also press L and then do the data as well. And now you can see this becomes ungrayed. And so now it's lost the link to the other file, but it's in here. In fact, the materials though are still linked into the other file. We get this little link icon over here. And then if we want to do that, just press L again, and then let's just make everything local. So that's basically copied everything into this scene, and now it's completely unconnected to the original file. So let's just delete that and take a look at our other original blend file. So that's the helicopter that we've been appending that helico.18 from. So let's take a look at that, 018. Let's just type that in the search bar of the outliner, and now we can find it parented under this armature here. So I'm just going to select that object there, and you can see there it is. And it's not at the center of the world. We would normally want to put this at the center of the world, but I'm going to ignore that step for a second, and then you'll kind of see what happens. So I'm going to go Control G and add it to a group, and you can see it's added to this group here. You can also just press T to come up to the bottom of our tool shelf here, and I'm just going to rename this to something tiny bit more meaningful, like Group Test. And then I can go File, and then let's save that out as just underscore group test. And then we can try having another go at linking this in. So File, Link, and then instead of the object, let's do the group that we've just created in the other file, group test, group test, and then link that in. And then it's in the exact same position that we wanted, but the pivot point is actually just at the center of the world. So hopefully that makes sense with why we might want to put this object at the center of the world before we created the group in the other blend file, in the original blend file. So now at least we can scale, rotate, and move this around, but still, if you wanted to edit this, that information is in the original file. All this is really is an empty that has been created, and if we take a look down the bottom in the properties window of the object data tab, we can see we just have this duplication section, group, and then group test. So this is cool because the artist can keep on working on it, and it keeps my file size here really small. And here's where we'll step it up a bit to see how when you're working between riggers and animators, all of this can play together. To do that, we'll analyze someone else's file, which in this case will be this Black Hawk file from Papa Dragon that we want to work with, and we're going to take a look at the final piece of the puzzle. So this is going to be analyzing someone else's blend, basically. So first of all, bit of a no-brainer. We want to obviously open up wherever that blend file is, but what I wanted to point out here is I want to load the user interface. So I just make sure this is checked. This means that we'll be able to see the interface the way it was configured by the author of the blend file, rather than the way that we've got our interface set up at the moment. So the way that the various screens are arranged, like the 3D view and the outliner and stuff. Sometimes important messages are translated this way from the author of the blend file. So it's worth bearing that in mind. So let's just click on Open Blend File, and then the first thing I'm going to do is just sort of clear up the view a little bit. So first of all, I want to collapse this window at the bottom. I don't think we need it. So I'm going to left click and drag once I've got the plus icon in the top right corner of this 3D view down here, and then left click and drag up, and then go down while I'm still holding down the button of the left mouse, and then just let go to collapse it. Then what we can do is just left click and drag between some of these windows just to reorganize the space between the outliner and the properties window mostly, and then N and T just to close out those sidebars. And then maybe I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, control middle mouse and drag towards the screen there just to see a little bit more of the helicopter. So let's say you have a team of people, a modeler, a rigger, and an animator. And you're the one who has to bring all those folks together in a working pipeline and set up the files. So let's save this off as another file. In case we ruin anything, we can always come back to the original. We'll work with _altered and save as. So first, let's check what we're looking at. So we're going to look at the layers at the bottom of the 3D view, and it's good news as things are organized into different layers. Now, the next thing that we should do is take a look at our add-ons. Go Control Alt and U to bring up the user preferences. On the add-ons tab, just make sure we type in layer, and just to check that the layer management add-on is enabled. And it is in my case, and we can find this on the tool shelf. So press T, take a look at the layers tab at the bottom there, and then open this up. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any messages in here to let us know what is going on each layer, but that's kind of not really a big deal. I'm sure we'll be able to figure this out. Also, you'll notice that we're only looking at layer 1 at the moment. And if we just click through, you can see that there are things, a bunch of things on the different layers. And there's in fact the thing that we have selected right now, it happens, you can see the little orange dot there, it happens to be on this layer. So layer 11. I'm just going to hide the empty layers there and bring up the indices just to make things a little bit easier. And then the next thing I'm going to do is just come back to the first layer. Just before we kind of start labeling layers up, I'm going to come over to the scenes tab. This is the next thing that I would recommend taking a look at, because there could be, for example, simplify set. So what we're looking at in the viewport is not necessarily what would be rendered, or it kind of would give us a false impression of really what this is. There isn't any simplify settings on or any other settings worth taking note of just at the moment. You will notice that if we select one of these objects and come over to the modifiers, that there are things like mirror modifiers, and there's the subsurf modifiers. So this will have a bit of an effect. If we middle click and drag around the view, it's a little bit sluggish for me, not massively a problem or anything, but I'm just going to click on the simplify so that in the viewport itself, we're just going to limit things to being just one subdivision. And that's kind of a bit smoother now. I'm just going to leave it at that. So first we want to set things up for our modeler and rigger. Now, because in this case, this file is already rigged, which we can see as there's an armature there with a load of stuff parented to it. We'll have a single file and we'll go file, save as, call it the same thing, but instead of this, we'll go alt_rigged and then just save that blend file. So next we'll organize stuff by basically naming the layers. So in this layer that we can see, this clearly is the helicopter meshes. So let's just call it helicopter. In the next layer along, if we select on one of these pieces, you can kind of see this is the rig. So let's label that accordingly, rig. And then next up we have layer 3, which looks to be the rendering setup for promo purposes. So we probably don't need that for our project. So let's press A to select everything and then X to delete. And that clears it out from our view there as well, thanks to the hide empty option. Down below here we have stuff which is likely, if we, let's just turn the other layers that we've looked at so far. We can press G to move things around. You can kind of see that this is a typical driver interface. So let's label that accordingly. So it's actually, you can see because of the orange dot, this is layer 11. So let's label that driver interface. Next up, we've got this layer out here. We could just use this interface here if we wanted to, but I'm just kind of sticking to this as well. So anyway, we have this layer here. Now these are just custom shapes for, you may recognize this kind of stuff. These are custom shapes for the rig. These are the shapes. That's why the rig looks like this. That's why the bones look like this, I should say. Thanks to this option down here, custom shapes. All right, so we have all our layers labeled, and I'm going to shift select those 3, and this is basically all we need to control our helicopter. So let's save it there. Next, let's check our materials and textures and stuff. So go shift Z to pop into rendered view, and you can see that it's all black because we basically deleted all the rendered stuff in layer 3. So let's come over to the world, because that's usually enough just to see what's going on, just to have some world lighting. So let's just take the strength to 1, and instead of it being quite dark, let's turn it up a little bit. And we'll go shift Z again, and that's much better. Problem is that has exposed some of these pink things, so that usually means missing textures. But if we want to be sure and just make sure it's not actually artistic decision, we can go to external data and report missing files. That pops this thing up, and if we pull down the header of the info window at the top and scroll down there, you can see, yep, there's a load of textures missing. So what are we going to do about that? Well, it actually doesn't look that bad. So it really only looks like a few things to me that are actually showing up in the render of any importance. So like this piece at the top here, if I can grab it, this piece, if we check it out there, that's a bit on the pink side. And another area which isn't is kind of this stuff. So if I tab into edit mode, select a face, let's go over to the materials tab and take a look at what that material is. It's this number 9 material. Let's take another look in rendered view. So what is happening here, let's just put that on to this bit here. So it was the number 9. So let's go to here, number 9, and let's take another look in rendered view. So that's sorted that bit out at the top. We've also got this stuff down at the side. So let's select the object, tab into edit mode, select the face, and we can see this is this object here. I'm again just going to switch it to number 9 of this stuff. Let's take another look in rendered view. So that's kind of corrected that bit of a pink block there. The only other thing I'm really concerned about is the windscreen wipers. So let's take a look over to those, and we can see that if we select one of the faces by tabbing into edit mode, it's this. So let's find another one. Let's try this plastic 2, see if that makes any difference. So let's take a look at that, shift Z, and now as far as I can tell, if we take a look completely around, we're pretty much good to go apart from this bit right at the back. So let's just change that bit up quickly. It's just this area here. What's on that face? It's material. So let's change material to be, I don't know, metal 001 perhaps? Yeah, okay, that'll do. All right, let's scroll right back out. And as a quick fix anyway, this is working fine. So let's just imagine the modeler finished the model and then handed it to the rigger. They added their rig stuff on another layer, and then that's where we're up to now. That's totally fine in this situation. At this point though, we only want either the rigger or the modeler to work on this file at any one time. And the rigger here isn't quite done, as it isn't quite ready to pass over to the animator yet, because there's a little problem. But before we get to what that problem is, we're just going to set a little bit of this up like we would do with another object that we want to link into another scene, which is to basically just select everything. So let's just go into object mode there, select everything that we can see that is part of our rig there, and go Control G, and that's going to put it into this group. And we're going to call this the heli, let's just call it heli. Okay, and then go File, and let's just save that, go Control S and save it. Now I've got another version of Blender open here, which is just a blank scene. Now let's just go File and then Link, and then find our rigged blend here, and then go down to Group, and then there's our heli. Now let's link that in, and you'll see that we have everything coming in now. Now the next important step that we need to make, and we'll just go over this again in a moment, is to just make a proxy here. So I'm going to go Control Alt and P to do that. It's just in the Object Settings, Make Proxy. So click on that and then find your armature. Now let's click on that, and now the armature should be able to be switched into pose mode, and now we can start to move things around. The bones are basically helping to control the object, and we can start to animate this. These drivers, however, we're not so lucky with, and this is the problem that we're going to find, because these should be bones and not meshes. So if we go back to the original file, we can see that these things are actually meshes instead of being part of the rig. So we're going to switch that over now. So let's take a look at what these are actually doing. So with this one here, if I just press G and go up and down with this, we get kind of some cool stuff happening with that tailbone there. This thing over here, and also these chopper blades are kind of coming down a little bit, but I don't see any bones for them. So if we come over to the mesh data, we can see that there's actually a driver. That's what this purple stuff is all about, is controlling a shape key. So we want something to replace this basically, because it kind of looks quite cool. The rest of this stuff, I mean, my French isn't very good. I'm assuming this is French. I think ferme is close, because I heard ferme la bouche, I think, is shut your mouth, which might come as no surprise that I've heard that before. Maybe that's apt, I don't know. But anyway, we need to check all these out. So this is opening those doors there, it looks like. They're down there. We have this one here, which is opening the front door, and then the one on the other side, and then I guess that's the door on the other side, is it? Let's see. Oh yeah, I see. Okay, so I think actually I'm just going to delete all of these and actually just keep this one up here. In fact, we've just left something. Let's delete that bit of text as well. So this thing here I want to keep for argument's sake anyway. So we want to basically replace this with a bone. So let's tab into edit mode with this mesh selected, and then with that face we can go Shift A and no, not Shift A, Shift S to snap the cursor to the selected, and then that means when we tab back out into object mode and select the rig and then tab into edit mode for the rig and go Shift A, we're going to create a bone at the location of that cursor, which is roughly into position, but I'm just going to move it down with G and then Z a little bit, so that's fine. And then I'm going to select something with the driver on. So tab into object mode, select these chopper blades, for example. I'm just going to left click and drag from the top right corner of this 3D view here just to split it. Let's close out that sidebar because things are getting really tiny now. So I'll press T, swap this to the graph editor, and we want to look at drivers, and we can see that pops up straight away. So now we want to press N to actually see the properties of the driver, and then we can come down here, and without going too much into rigging and drivers and all that sort of stuff, because that's kind of a big topic, I'm just going to just point out that basically this is being driven, the value of this driver is being driven by the location of this plane.04, which is this little plane that we've got over here, which is that bone is now obscuring. It's using the Z location and it wants to know about it in world space. So we're going to change a few things about that. First of all, we're going to swap it from being the plane to being the armature. So let's just click the eyedropper. Let's come over to here. You can see that we can just click anywhere on the armature, but we want this bone in particular. So let's go over to this bone again, tab into edit mode, and it's called bone.009. Just because we can, let's go over to the bone settings and just change this to be the driver bone. And that's basically renamed it so that it's a little bit simpler to find. So let's tab back into object mode, select the chopper blades, and let's pull this down to see the driver bone. Hooray! So the thing with bones are that the Z location of an object going straight up and down is kind of more like the Y location of a bone. So I'm going to switch that to Y location, and I'm also going to swap it to local space. So let's test this out. Let's go over to selecting the rig. I'm going to switch to pose mode now, and then with that bone selected, I'm going to press G and then Z, and now we can see that that is having an effect on the shape key of those chopper blades. So that's cool, but if we just kind of press G and kind of wiggle it about, it's not got that, it wasn't sticking into position like the other driver was, which the other mesh was, which was cool. So let's just do that. Let's come over to the constraints, Addon bone constraint for the limit location, and it's on the Y, and we're going to go 0 to 1, and we're going to swap that to local space. And now let's see what we can do. Press G and then Z, and I'm just going all the way up, and it just sticks into position, which is cool. The thing is, it can still go side to side and back and front, so I'm just going to come over to the bone tab, not the object tab, but the bone tab, come down to the transform locks and lock it on X and Z, because we still want it to move on Y. Now I can be a bit more liberal with how I'm kind of moving that around, and it all is cool. So let's just do the final bone. In here, the tail bone is being directed by, or driven I should say, by this plane.004 again. So let's just make all those same changes again. So let's get rid of that. Choose our armature, wherever it is, object armature. Choose the bone, driver bone. It's the Y location and it's the local space. And then let's try that now. Select the bone and let's go up and down, and we can see it is now in effect. So let's save this, Control S, rigged. Oh, and one more thing, we actually don't need this mesh anymore. So let's just make sure we're in object mode so we can select it, and then we can go X to delete. And then also I'm just going to squish this out a little bit more over there so that it's there if we want it quickly. But otherwise I'm happy with that, and we can save that off. And we can check this is something we can now pass on to another member of the team, namely the animator. So we've already done the most crucial step, which we did when we were demonstrating what the problem was with the mesh being used as a driver. So what we want to be able to do is press B and border select across everything, and then I'm not going to do this now because we've already done this step, but Control G to all place it into a group. The group that we've done already for this is, if we check the object data settings, is the heli group. So that's all we need on that. Let's open up a fresh version of Blender, which we've got here. I'm going to press A to delete everything in that, and then go File and then Link, and let's make sure that that is the right file, the rigged file, and then click on the group and then the heli, and then let's link that in, and that's created this empty and parented the duplication of the group into it, so we can check that in the object data tab here, and we've got the heli down there. But we can't exactly pose this, we've only got options for object mode. So for that we can go object, make proxy, or Control Alt P, and then we find the armature, and now we have this heli proxy. So what we can do now is see if we can go to object and pose mode now, and then let's see if this driver is working. Press G and then go up and down, and it is. And we can also still select the main thing here and then maybe start to move that off and do whatever other animation that we want to do. So that's what we want. We want the animator to be able to do something. So let's go File and then Save As. Actually, let's call this heli underscore blades rotate. Let's give this an anim at the end. Let's go Save As Blend File. So let's just do the simple animation of getting these blades to spin round. For that we want this bone here, which if I press G to move around, you can see it's being controlled by this bone. And then if we come over to the bone properties in the properties window, you can see the rotations are this quaternion which are cool, but it's a little bit complicated to understand for what we need right now, I think. So I'm going to set that to XYZ Euler instead, and then we just have this one channel that we need to rotate to be able to get what we want. So I'm going to set that to 0 and then right click it and insert a single keyframe. Now if we go Alt A to play the animation, you can see we're getting a low frame rate. So if we come over to the Scenes tab, come down to our Simplify, enable it in the viewport, if we set that down to 1 like we were doing earlier, and press Shift and left arrow to just come back to the frame 0, so that when we press Alt A, we can see that we're now on 22 frames per second or so. So let's just set this down to 0 so that we get the full 24 frames. So let's go Shift and left arrow just to take us to the start. And I'm thinking that if I press Alt A and just kind of feel it, let's have them going around quite slowly. So something to about there. I'm going to come over to this bone properties again and key in 360. Right click, insert single keyframe, and let's press E with our cursor in the timeline there just to set the end frame, and then Alt A again, and now we have something where they're spinning around. It kind of slows down at the start and end. So there's a couple of ways we can solve this, but we need to get into our graph editor anyway, so I'm just going to split that window. Let's select the graph editor from this window list, and I'm just going to press the home key to just frame everything up there, and there's our Y channel for the rotation of that bone, and you can see it dips in and out. So they're already selected, so we can just press T and then set the interpolation to linear, and so now we should get something which spins them round reasonably. If we just press the N key in the graph editor, the thing I actually want to do is set a modifier on it, which is going to be a cycles modifier. And you can see if I go Shift Space to maximize the view there, you can see that this is creating the same animation and just running it again for an infinite amount of time, or at least if we wanted to restrict it, we could, but we want this to be infinite. The problem with this is that could create some issues with motion blur if it suddenly switches back like that, which is not realistic. So we're going to do a repeat with offset before and after the keyframes that we have, and now we get this nice straight line ad infinitum, which is exactly what we want. So now I'm just going to go Alt A to play that animation again, hide that bone, go full screen with Shift Space here, and let's take a look at it. And that's doing exactly what I want. So the other thing that I want to do is to switch this to the dope sheet and take a look at the action editor. Let's middle click on this bar just to see what we've got. So we've got the heli proxy action, and I'm going to rename this to just the same thing as the file that we're working in, heli underscore blades rotate underscore anim. And let's just file and then save that out. So let's finally bring all this together. We have this fresh scene. I can delete the cube, and then we can go File, Link, and let's just go back to where our blends are. And we can see there's our rigged file. So let's go and find the group, the helicopter. Now that's got the rig and the meshes inside. Let's do the Control-Alt-P to make a proxy of the armature, and that allows us now to be able to pose this if we want. And then also we want the animation, so we want to grab this chopper blades bone there, and then we can split the view, left click and drag across from the top right corner there, open up the dope sheet and the action editor. If we middle click and drag along the header bar there, you can see that we can give ourselves a bit more space. Here's all the actions, and there aren't any in the scene right now. That's unsurprising. So let's go File, Link, find our animation file. There it is. Click on the action, and there's our action, and then we'll link from that. And now when we go to do this, we can see it's there. So there's the L for the linked 0 to let us know that nothing else is using this right now. So let's click on that and let's see what happens. So we have this animation that has these two keyframes for that animation have come across. Now if I go Alt A to play this, not a lot happens, and also the frame rate is very, very slow. So let's go down on our scenes, turn our simplify on, set that to 0 for now. So just in the viewport, we're just going to shut off any subdivision modifiers. And then if we just play this now, again, nothing. Well, this is because it's a Y Euler rotation keyframe. So if we select that bone over here, we can see that this is quaternions. So if we set that to XYZ Euler, you can see that this is actually now should now work. And there we go. If we press Alt A, we can see it spinning around, and now we can go and select something else and start animating this or whatever. So as you can see there, that's a little bit of a problem. So it would be a better thing if we could go back to the rig and update that. Now this gives us an opportunity to demonstrate one last thing, which is the Edit Linked Library add-on. First of all, we're just going to save this file though. So let's go File, Save As, and let's just call it the UH60 Black Hawk underscore, let's call it the master file, and then save that. So this is going to be nice, quick and easy. Let's give ourselves a little bit more space in the 3D view. And then in our user preferences with Control Alt and U, we can find our add-ons, and in particular the linked library add-on. As you can see there, let's enable it, and then we'll find it show up in our Relations tab of the tool shelf. So let's pull that out, and we can see that what we've got selected here is actually from the rigged blend, which is exactly what we want. We can just click Edit Library Armature. So let's just click that, and then we're straight into the rigged file. So what we can do now is, with that bone selected, which is nice and simple for us, we can just come over, set that to XYZ Euler, and then return to the original file. And that is it. Any further times we link that armature in, it'll automatically be set to Euler for us. So I hope this has been helpful. We've got a lot more of this sort of thing coming, so if you want to stay in the loop and have it hot off the press, consider hitting subscribe or hook up to us in any of the other usual ways. Okay, thanks for watching.